Hello everybody, my name is Grace and I will be giving my Teach 1 presentation on cursors and repeated SQL. This presentation was prepared as part of the HAP 671 course on healthcare databases taught by Dr. Chintalapani at George Mason University's Department of Health Administration and Policy. I'm a student in the Health Informatics field set to graduate in 2023. I will be going over several things in this presentation. First, I will begin by defining what a cursor is in SQL. Next, I will go over the types of cursors found in SQL, the advantages and disadvantages of using a cursor, arguments associated with cursors, the life cycle of a cursor in SQL, the syntax of cursors, and finally, I will go over a simple example of what using a cursor looks like in SQL. Now, what is a cursor in SQL? So, within SQL, what is known as a context area is created to process a query. An SQL cursor could most be simply defined as an object used to control and manipulate data within this context area. Now, the rows that the cursor controls is known as the active set. Without the use of a cursor, SQL could be compared to an entire bag of groceries. However, when we bring a cursor into the equation, it could be compared to taking items out of that grocery bag one by one, or in this case, row by row. There are two types of cursors found in SQL. The first is an implicit cursor. An implicit cursor is automatically created whenever an SQL statement is executed. They are associated with insert, update, and delete statements, and they are capable of fetching a single row at a time. However, they are more vulnerable to data errors, and less control is given to the programmer. Implicit cursors automatically execute the life cycle of the cursor. An explicit cursor varies greatly from the implicit cursors. These are created manually by the programmer, with the result being to gain control over the context area. These are created using the select statement. They are less vulnerable to data errors, and they manually execute the steps of the cursor lifecycle. With anything, there are advantages and disadvantages to using a cursor in SQL. The main advantages would be the fact that they have the ability to perform row-by-row processing and also the ability to access and manipulate a specific set of data versus only retrieving a full data set result. Some disadvantages of SQL, on the other hand, include the fact that because it is a temporary work area, the SQL cursor takes up a lot of storage and memory. And due to this increased use of resources, performance and speed is slower. There are several arguments related to the SQL cursor, and I will go over a few here. So the insensitive argument. This defines a cursor that makes a temporary copy of the data to be used by the cursor. The read-only argument prevents updates to be made through the cursor. The update argument defines columns that are able to be updated through the cursor. The local argument defines the scope of the cursor is local to the batch, stored procedure, or trigger in which the cursor was created. The global argument defines that the scope of the cursor is global to the connection. Finally, the scroll argument defines that all fetch options, including first, last, prior, next, relative, and absolute, are available within the cursor. The life cycle of an SQL cursor has 5 main steps. The first is to declare the cursor, and the cursor is declared by specifying its name and data type, in which the data type is cursor, and this is done by using the declare keyword in SQL. Next, we have to open the cursor. The cursor is open in order to store the data from the result set by using the open keyword. Next, we fetch. Rows can be fetched either one by one or in a block to manipulate the data. After we fetch, we close the cursor. The cursor must be closed after finishing work involved with it. This is done by using the close keyword. Finally, we must deallocate the cursor. This is the final step of the cursor lifecycle, erasing the cursor definition and everything associated with it. This is done by using the deallocate keyword. Some basic syntax related to SQL cursors. Of course, we have our declare statement in order to declare variables, our select statement in order to assign variables to a specific value. The declare cursor statement is used to assign the cursor values that will be evaluated. The open statement is of course used to open the cursor. The fetch next statement assigns specific values from the cursor to the variables to match the declare cursor and select statement. The while statement prompts SQL to begin and continue the data processing. The begin end statement starts and ends a block of code. The close statement releases current data but permits the cursor from being opened again. Finally, the deallocate statement deletes the cursor as a whole. As you can see here, we have a simple example of what a query for an SQL cursor would look like. So you'll see at the top, we first start by declaring the variable for holding records. Then we declare the cursor. Next, we select the query. After that, we open the cursor. Then we fetch the first record into the variable. We loop until the record's being fetched. Then we process the record, fetch the next record. After we are done fetching all of our records that we want, we then close the cursor and deallocate the cursor. Thank you so much for watching my presentation.